everyone, and welcome to Soul GPS, where we take our lives back in our hands after narcissistic abuse. In the video today, what I wanted to talk about is address a question I received from one of my Polish viewers, and Judita is asking about the reasons why she got into a toxic relationship, even though she feels that her childhood was good. Her father, she mentions here, is really calm, doesn't interfere in anything. She said that there are times in her childhood when she missed tenderness and care from him, but as she grew up, she understood that this is how he is. He's emotionally reserved, a little bit more reluctant in that way, but he does love her very much and he would give her everything. So the message that she had sent is pretty long, so I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but basically the relationship she ended up getting into was psychopathic, extremely violent, dangerous, really bizarre events, like waking up to the man breaking into her house, laying next to bed. That was a form of Hoover, laying next to her bed. So pretty disturbing, sounds like. So her question is, why? Why did it happen to me? Why did I fall for a person like that, even though I had a good childhood? Now, she does not mention here anything about her mother, and the little bit about the father is actually something I can quite relate to, because my dad, the way he showed love to us was through creating a kind of like a stable environment, but he wasn't necessarily emotionally available. And I don't know if that's how it is, if it's because of my culture in Poland. I see that a lot, not always, but I see that a lot. But I also saw it in the States when I lived there, and I see it in other cultures too, so I'm not sure how much of it is cultural. But so like I said, she did not mention anything about the mother, whether there was any abuse from her or so on. But one thing I do know is that emotional neglect does have an impact on how we grow up. So even if the father was loving in many ways, and even though we have had the ability later on to rationalize and think about, the fact that there are just different ways of showing us love, it did have an impact, especially for sensitive people. So, but I want to address this question, like broaden it up a little bit more and talk about, what happens when actually for people who really did grow up in nurturing environments, and why is it that they do get into those toxic relationships. And I will be referring back to the question here too. So I thought about this, and I came up with 7 reasons, 7 factors that may play a big role in shaping us in this society, in this culture, in this world. And despite the fact that, again, we maybe did not sustain very intense abuse. I mean, I would say most of us have brushed against some form of abuse in our life, but even if it wasn't so intense that it made us a codependent, or it made us, super empathic, or it made us, it gave us some other deep vulnerability that made us fall for these toxic people, they could have played a role. So number 1 I put down is social or societal conditioning. So we're living in a world that is picking up speed. I'm sure many of you have noticed that, and it's not just the fact that as we get older, time does seem to speed up, but also because our technology, our way of life, everything is advancing at a pretty advanced speed. So there's some good things about that, because now we have access to a lot of information. We're super connected with each other. We're able to do this, right? I'm speaking to you from another side of the world, and hopefully I'm able to help you with your struggles. But also, we're living in this culture of insta relationships, fast food, fast profits. We want to make things happen very quickly, and especially for many of us who haven't really been taught the rules of this world, the principles that operate underneath, and we're trying to kind of figure it out without having a map. And after many failures, we often get to the point where we're like, okay, well, either the clock is ticking, or, why am I not successful yet? Why am I not married yet? Why am I not this? And this is a form of major vulnerability in and of itself, something I have fallen into myself, and it always ended up as a disaster. But we want to create these quick relationships, and which is like a perfect scenario for the narcissist who is looking for people with vulnerabilities and who is looking for exploiting your timeline, right? So what I mean by that is they're in the love bombing stage. They move fast, and I mean lightning speed. You know, they rush intimacy, as Dana had said in her fabulous red flag series that she did. You know, rushing intimacy is one of the red flags of narcissistic relationship. They're pushing, they're doing things quickly, they want to hook you in. And sex is one of the best ways to hook us in, because again, back to the chemicals, you know, back to the fact that we can get quickly addicted, we can get quickly bonded to them. Maybe not yet trauma bonded, that's going to come later in the devaluation stage, but the seeds are being planted, because oftentimes these relationships are super intense. That can be traumatic in and of itself, and they're just moved very quickly. So before we're able to really gather our senses, they make us feel like we have met our soulmate, like we have met the person from our dreams. They mirror us perfectly, and responsibility on our shoulders is the one that we're allowing it to move quickly. And no fault, no blame if you did that without being aware that that's what you were doing. Many of us were there, but the rules of the game change once awareness comes in. And so, having been through this, now take it as a lesson with everything really in your life. Anything that has value, whether it's a project you're working on, whether it's a friendship, whether it's, you know, travel plans, whether it is anything really, if it takes time to do and you give it your love and you give it that nurturing that it needs, then it's really worthwhile. It's the same with relationships. Take your time, slow things down. Don't fall for the insta gratification, right? And don't let them use that. So point number 2 factor number 2 is slow cooker conditioning by the narcissist, psychopath, toxic person to accept the abuse. So it doesn't happen usually overnight, you know. I mean, in my case, it happened. I had 2 examples. One was slow cooker for sure, 9 years. The other one was super quick, 4 months, and it was like, boom, you know, all bombs went off at the same time practically. And made me reel from it for a very long time, because it didn't have like the first relationship had kind of like this waning point. This one didn't. This one was like spike, 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 and then crash. So it was a really difficult recovery. I'm still picking through some of the scraps, still looking at it, still going like, what in the world happened? But the slow cooker conditioning, okay, back to if you had a good family, if you came from a relatively positive background in your life, if you didn't really have issues, you know, even if you're a very positive person and, you know, have surrounded yourself with, for the most part, really good, positive people who love you and you know, give you support. Then you meet this character who's moving at a really fast speed, who's finding out everything they can about you. They're giving you a lot of attention, because again, they need to find out everything and anything they can about you. If the person, as I had alluded in my other videos on borderline people, if the person has also borderline elements, then they're more empathic and they're able to really like mirror back at you with the feelings, like what you're going through and what's going on in your heart. If they're more in the narcissistic spectrum, then it's mostly all up here intellectually. They're acting basically. And then slowly over time, what's going to happen is they're going to start turning up the heat, escalating the abuse. It may start really slight, such as they may not like the makeup you're wearing, they may not like the outfit you have, they may not like the car you're driving, they may have an issue with your job. They might have an issue with the fact that you have kids from a previous marriage, but you know, it's okay for now, and then eventually going to give you more grief about it. They may have issues about, you know, the length of your hair, you know, just little things initially. And then as you open up, because you want to create this intimacy, right? You guys are telling them about your family, maybe some things you may not particularly like. You may describe scenarios that have happened to you in the past. Now, this is all food for the narcissist to use against you eventually. you know, so you might present it as, you know, that somebody has had a problem with you, and you present your point of view, and then next time in the argument they're going to turn it around and they say, well, no, I think your aunt didn't like you because you're just a crazy person, right? So they're going to now flip it around. They're not going to be on your side anymore. They're going to suddenly change teams. They do that a lot. But they do it, they do, again, the slow cooker way, like that metaphor of the frog, right? You throw a frog into boiling water, it will jump right out. You throw a frog into a pot of cold water and gradually turn the heat, it will stay there and cook. So, okay, let's move on to point number 3. No proper education on red flags. So many of us have fallen into this, into these relationships. I mean, myself included, even though, you know, my family background is not perfect. Lots of toxicity, lots of abuse, lots actually. But because I wasn't educated, I have fallen for the last one. Like, have I really gotten it down? I think that maybe I wouldn't have fallen for it, but I did. And so many of us don't know about rushing intimacy. They don't know about love bombing and what that is. They don't know about mirroring. They don't know about addiction, oftentimes being a sign of someone, you know, masking something else, you know, not really working on their issue. You know, what else? Just financial problems, you know, mess, frequent lying, gaslighting, rationalizing and turning things around. Everything you describe, you have an issue, they have always a way to explain it. Just also brushing things off, you know, and when they have a problem, they expect you to really be there for them, but when you have a problem, they don't. And so all of these things, we're not educated about it. And even if, you know, we saw one or two videos and it's kind of like in our head, but then we still fall for the charms. It's like we almost have to really study this thing in such depth that it penetrates the core of our being. And, you know, I don't know, honestly. I mean, I'd love to hear from you. You tell me in the comments below, but I don't know if it's possible for someone who hasn't been through one of those relationships to completely build the immunity to never fall for it. You know, I think it may be more of the matter of luck, or the matter of, you know, having a different path in life that just, you know, takes them in a different place. It might be a different kind of mental makeup, environment. I don't know, but I almost feel like you almost have to, it's a form of initiation. It's like you almost have to go through this in order to then learn what it is and recognize it so it never happens again. So point number 3, no proper education on red flags. It lets them get under our radar, and essentially. Number 4, intuition undermined. So one of the first things that the narcissist will do, especially for an empath, is cut you off from your intuition. They will make you put your trust in them by subtly denigrating and demeaning your own hints about things. It's like, no, I don't think so. No, you're not. No, I think it's differently. And I constantly like making you not trust yourself, but trust in them, to the point where you may want to you know, ask for their opinion about almost everything. Like, well, you're about to buy something, you're about to take a class, you're not sure, you don't even know which restaurant you should go out to. It's a conditioning, and because you want their approval, you want them to be happy, you want the good times to last, and that's a sure way to do this. And as they cut you off right here, you know, at the neck, from your intuition, which is seated inside of your gut, inside of your body, and you're only operating from here, then you're going to start questioning yourself, and the cognitive dissonance starts to set in, and it's like we get really neurotic, and it's really difficult to make right from wrong. So this is what they do, and that's the point of love bombing, I would say. The point of love bombing and of getting you bonded and hooked in is to make you lose trust in yourself, because it just becomes that much easier to manipulate you. Point number 5 is no boundaries. Many of us weren't taught what boundaries are, you know, maybe we hear about it, boundaries these, but what are they? What are they really, you know? And in most cases, it's something, it's an agreement we make with ourselves, and that we're not going to let somebody trespass a certain barrier that we set up inside. I'm not talking about walls, although there is a time especially right after we go through intense narcissistic abuse, that we do have to almost like put up a great wall, you know, put up the Iron Curtain, so that because we get so triggered and we're reeling from CPTSD, and it's good for us to retreat and regather and recollect. So if that's what you're going through, be gentle with yourself and do not question the validity of you needing to do that. You have to do that. It's totally fine. Slowly you start coming out of it. I made some videos on loneliness that deal with this, and I plan to do way more on the topic, but you know, be really gentle with yourself. Do not question that. However, over time, as you start to come out, as you start to interact with people, you're going to have to put up these boundaries. And this is an agreement you make with yourself, that you don't allow somebody to treat you in a certain way. And this, again, really links up with the intuition part, which is that as you feel that something isn't right for you, you just simply don't do it. You know, it's like better safe than sorry. You may be wrong. Sure. I mean, none of us are perfect. I'm sure I have made so many assumptions after I have been through my abusive relationship in my recovery stage. I'm still dealing with a bunch of recovery because there are other characters that are in my vicinity that are triggering the shit out of me. But, you know, I'm just like, I'm cautious. So I'm like, you know, I don't feel like doing this today, or I feel like staying home, or I feel like, even though this person might be well-meaning, and this might be good for me, but if I feel like I'd rather not do it, I won't do it. But so again, the other way our boundaries are violated in childhood is with enmeshing parents. Again, I don't know, Judita, what kind of a mother you had, but I'm very familiar with enmeshment, and it's a form of abuse where the parent does not let the child individuate. It's supposed to happen around age 1 or 2. When the child starts to walk, you know, they get stronger, they get more confident, they try things. You know, they might be doing bad things like putting their little fingers inside of, plugs, and that's bad, and the parent needs to be there. But when a child is being fed something they don't like and they say, no, I don't like it, you're not supposed to force it down their throat. You know, there is an amount of respect that really every parent should incorporate in the way they're raising their child. It's absolutely paramount, because it can be super devastating when the parent wants basically the child to be a carbon copy or a mini-me version of themselves, or an extension of their ego. And then when you start to individuate and start to do things on your own, you're plagued with so much guilt, because you feel like you're now hurting the parent. And so we can take that into our relationship later down the road. It happened to me. To me, relationships and love meant total enmeshment, and I did not realize that was toxic. So what I would do is I would just, like, we would join everything, you know, like I would take on his opinions, and I would expect him to like the music I listen to, because if he didn't, then maybe we're not soulmates, you know. I mean, it was that neurotic, it was that extreme. So learning to put boundaries where we can have differences, where there's certain behaviors that are just not acceptable. And when we learn nonviolent communication with each other to say, hey, you know, I really didn't appreciate you saying this, and I would have really have hoped if you handled it this way, and because this is how it made me feel, let's work together to make this better, right? And again, I don't know if this is possible to do with narcissist. I've tried with, again, someone I'm dealing with here who's very close to me, and it's just a daily struggle. You know, it's a daily struggle. So I would say like one of the best things you can do is to move away and create your own safe space where you can focus on recovery. Again, a little bit of a different subject. I could probably make a 10-hour video, no kidding, because there's just so much territory to cover. But okay, let's stick to this. Okay, and another really important thing is a sense of, with the enmeshment, it's like you feel like you own your parents for being born, you know, that sense of guilt, like I have to do what they're expecting me to do because I own them. You don't own them shit, okay? And also, a very important thing is what oftentimes undermines our ability to set personal preferences and stick by them, aka boundaries, is fear of rejection, and we all suffer from it. You know, it's something that we just have to face, is that not everyone is going to like us, and that's okay. That's totally okay. Like, one of my biggest heroes, I always think of him when I think of rejection, is Stephen King. Some of you who have watched my videos may know that I'm an aspiring writer. I'm a writer. I'm an aspiring author of a best-selling book. Let's just put it that way. It's one of my biggest dreams in life. But anyway, so I've studied other writers such as Stephen King, and one of the things I remember he had written in one of his autobiographies was that he would write these letters, you know, for his stories to these publishing companies, and he would get so many rejection letters back that he found the longest nail he could and put it over his desk and started putting those letters, because this is, you know, back before we had emails. It got to the point where the nail couldn't take any more of those rejection letters. So my lesson here, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up, is that it's okay for people to reject us, is that it does not mean that we're not going to succeed. I mean, he's one of the most prolific, successful writers of all times, and yet look at the amount of rejection he had to put up with. So we need to do the same thing and stop being so worried that other people don't like us. They don't like us, fuck it, cool, no problem. You move on and you do your thing anyway, and don't worry about that. But this can help, this can really undermine our ability to set boundaries. So try to not worry about this too much. Oh, here's another really good practice for boundaries, which one of the best verbal boundaries you could have is to say no. And that is, so many of us just have such problems saying the word no, that we just don't know. We don't know how to do it. It's just like, you know. So take a friend, if you have one, with you on a walk for I'd say an hour, and make an agreement with them that they're going to be asking you to do things with you, and everything they're going to ask for, you're going to reply with a no. You can do it walking downtown, you can do it walking through nature, and they're going to suggest to you, well, why don't we have some chicken tonight? You'll say, no, I don't like chicken. All right, well, why don't we go see a movie? No, I don't want it. You know, and you don't have to just make that full thing for an hour, but like interject that, play with it. And it's really interesting because like sometimes it's just like with exercise, you don't know you can't do a certain pose or, you know, or say a word in another language, or lift so much weight, unless you do it just one time. It's all it takes. And if you try it, if you really try to practice saying no and setting those boundaries, it may help you to get to the next stage, because it's a lifetime practice. We just have to get better and better at it, because the truth is, like, the more successful you'll become by living your life that you were meant to live, the more successful you become, what is going to happen is more people are going to want things from you. So no matter where you are in your life, there's always going to be a certain level of attention coming your way that is not nurturing to you. So you're going to have to say no. You know, your time is precious, your energy is precious, so don't let other people steal it. Okay, that was a lot of talk on number 5. Let's move to number 6, related. It's eroding boundaries. So even for many of us who have had the ability to set boundaries, have been lucky enough to have had, just like perhaps you did, he's saying she has had the ability to grow up healthily. What the narcissist will do is they will hone in on it, and they will just push, and they will push, and they will push, so that your sense of personal space is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller until they're able to just like literally penetrate right through you and mesh with you. And then you no longer can tell the difference between them and you, and it can create a very, very deep, intense, toxic trauma bond from which to come out is really long. It takes a while, and it's really difficult. Again, something I feel like I'm becoming an expert in, unfortunately. So remember, whatever they're doing to you is a reflection on them, not you. It's about what's going on with them. If they're treating you badly, if they're telling you horrible things, it's a reflection of who they are, not who you are. And you let the poison in. So you have to stop. You have to stop letting the poison in. And one of the best things you can do in this case is go no contact, low contact, or gray rock. Yeah, just gray rock is basically you're still there physically, but you're not there emotionally, you're disconnected emotionally. It's really difficult to do. It's like, I think they should start giving out black belts in boundary training. No kidding. All right, and my final point, although I might add another one, it's just something's dawning in my mind right now, is self-protection is not instilled well or deeply enough. And this is the father principle of bringing up children. Is I often say this, I got this from Pete Walker's CPTSD from Surviving to Thriving, fantastic book. You know, I could read a page and mull over it for months. I mean, it's that deep, thick, and rich. But what he's saying is that ultimately it boils down to the mother's role in raising a child and instilling a sense of self-compassion, because they're being compassionate to the child. So the child mirrors that back, and they're able to internalize that, just like abuse, right? It happens on the outside, but before we know it, penetrates that boundary and then becomes internalized. Same with love and compassion. It comes from the outside initially when we're babies, then it penetrates that boundary, and then babies don't have very strong boundaries to begin with. So this should happen pretty quickly. And then the love sinks in, it settles in the heart and in the mind of the baby. And the baby then feels it and feels safe, and then is able to project that back onto the mother and then other people. Now then there's the self-protection side of the father, when the father is acting as the protective shield for the child. And this happens usually, you know, it happens early on too, but it really kicks in around the age 5, 6, 7, when a kid is now in school, and you know they're coming home because they've been bullied and this and that, and the father's supposed to stand in and step out and protect the child, say, no, there's nothing wrong with you, these people were wrong for having said that, you need to learn to stand up for yourself, this is how you do it, right? And most of us never had that, but this is something we then take into the world so that we're able to protect ourselves from abuse in a courtroom, abuse in the boardroom, you know, abuse in an office, in wherever it is that we work, in the fields, in the coal mines, wherever we are. We need to be able to then protect ourselves and say, no, this is wrong. I'm not going to put up with this. So this is the father principle. But instead, what often happens is we get neglected. And I would say here, Yudita, for you, that this is kind of what happened. I know that you know, and I'm in the same boat, that our fathers were really there for us the best way they could. You know, they showed their love, you know, the 5 love languages, by the things that they do, by their actions. They weren't maybe there for us emotionally. But it does leave, you know, it does leave a scar. There's none of it. We feel like we're not important. We feel like we're neglected. So then we don't have that. And since we haven't spent enough time talking about these important issues with our fathers, most of us haven't, then we go into the world without that protective shield, with really weak boundaries. And societal conditioning pressuring us to get shit done quickly, you know, to get married quickly, to get the beautiful boyfriend, and, you know, to get the career, like do this quickly, and like all of this, and then boom, you know, we get nailed. So I hope this helps. And then there's another thing that came up, wow, this is a long video. Another thing that came up to me as I was talking is there may be also a certain kind of like a spiritual purpose in this whole thing. And this is something I should make a separate video on, because it's something I am just now discovering within myself, and why my last relationship that has basically ended up devastating me and shifted me in a completely different direction in life, which now I see as a blessing, happened. And it was one of, if not the most significant relationship. It was the most devastating, the darkest by far. But it's like I almost needed that to shake me up and wake me up to realize that true love is self-love. That the paradigm I grew up with, that somebody else is going to come in and save me from the pain, you know, that I have inherited from my own toxic family, is going to somehow be abated and assuaged by another person. It doesn't work that way, you know, because we can't even recognize a healthy love unless we first feel it within ourselves. That's why it all comes back down to ourselves. And if we can generate that fountain of self-love and self-respect inside of us, and then go out in the world, we'll see other fountains out there, other beings who are doing the same. And then we can create a harmonious relationship. Not when we ourselves inside, you know, have vulnerabilities and in our foundations. And our foundations are not strong enough to begin with, that a hurricane like a narcissist can come through and level our field. You know, that means that there's stuff we need to still work on. And the great thing about the narcissist, again, I say that a lot, it will not feel like it if you're in the throes of recovery. It's gonna feel horrible. But there will come a point when you'll see it, and it'll start coming through, like first like little pieces of light through the clouds, is that this devastation had to happen because what's coming next is so grand and so fabulous, and it's like so you, that if you had to take your time getting there in this lifetime, you wouldn't have enough time. So they kind of like cut things down to the basics. It's priority setting 101. Like once nothing's practically left, what's really important? And so we then start focusing. A client of mine recently said that, it was so beautiful. I said, you know, you get so pure. You get so pure after this abuse that really the thing that really helps you is the most fundamental stuff, like self-love, like getting enough sleep, like nurturing yourself, like eating good food, like surrounding yourself with really nice people, like reading good books, like turning off TV, shit like that. Sorry for swearing so much on this one, but you get the idea, is that that's what it takes. So I hope that that's kind of point number 8. That's a little bonus point, is that sometimes it's what it takes, because we don't know. It's so difficult for us to reflect on ourselves, to know the depth of our pain that we've been carrying. And it's the narcissist that comes in and catalyzes that. And in that way, there is a bit of like a spiritual purpose in that. But I don't want to give them a credit that they're somehow enlightened beings that are coming in to rescue us from ourselves. No. It's not like that at all. Don't misinterpret this. These people are very limited in the way that they operate, and in the way that they're able to have, they don't have a spiritual perspective on anything. All they think about is what's right in front of them and what they can get from another person. But sometimes we're just so giving, and we have so covered up this pain by wanting to be good to other people. We've neglected ourselves, we've abandoned ourselves so much that we need somebody to abandon us even more. Oh, here it is. We need somebody to abandon us even more than we have abandoned ourselves, to see the degree to which we have done that. Again, no blame, no fault. It's something we've been trained to do. But after we've been through it, game over, game changes, and this is time for growth, self-empowerment, and living the life of our dreams. I'm sending you guys lots of love from Poland. Remember, trust your intuition as you're moving forward, because it will guide you to the next step. And I'll see you in another video. Ciao.